In the 10 years that New Life Foundation has existed and presented classes, no one has ever come to these classes over the years, no one has ever been subjected to anything that would hurt them. No one has ever been accused of being too far gone. No one has ever been insulted. It may seem that way at the start, and it does at the start. It may seem to those of you who are new here today that what you're hearing is something that is against your life. And I want you to know right now that everything, whether I speak or someone else speaks behind the mic there, everything you hear is for you. You don't see it. I know you don't see it. And you don't know you don't see it. You don't understand it. This is why it is essential above all, for the sake of your own personal life, that you come back here again and again, every single meeting. Don't miss anything until the time comes when the Spirit of truth itself, you prefer the word God, that's fine. God Himself, the Spirit of reality, call it what you want, begins to show you something you never knew before, which is that you have been on the wrong track, not because you're irredeemably evil or bad, but because you haven't understood. Everyone in this room who has come to even a small degree of understanding has gone through what all new people must go through. But they did the one essential thing, which is to listen and try to sense something different. Where you go now, you don't hear anything different. You hear the same old thing, and you love the familiarity of it. You love the comfort of it because it doesn't disturb you. The only way you're ever going to break out of your concealed and suppressed pain, anxiety, is to deliberately expose the enemy inside of you to disturbance so you can see it and you say, this is enough. I am not going to spend one more day of my life giving in to the weakness that has taken me over. And you know it has taken you over. Right here in this room in Boulder City, Nevada, is an extremely rare and unique place where you will learn how to break out of all the sickness that society has saturated you with all your life. You'll see through everything. You'll see through yourself. You'll see through people who deceive you. You'll see through phony organizations that have lied to you and have kept you in the chains that you are now in, and you know it. What more do you want than that? Than to break out of everything, now you listen to me, break out of everything that has been secretly tormenting you. You know very well the only thing you have is tears. And fears, tears and fears. Isn't that a pretty good rhyme for most people's lives? Not a very harmonious rhyme, is it? We'll show you how to do it. And don't you dare listen to any devil in human form who tells you lies about what goes on here. They are trying to keep you in the hell that you're in because that is what they have preferred. I'll say one more thing, then we'll go on to the regular talk. In this room, 4 times a week, and more than that, whether you see it or not, understand it or not, in this room is the pure truth itself. Right. Everything that is good for you, healthy for you, happy for you, and if you persist, one day you will see it, not because I'm telling it to you, but because you're living it from yourself. And the people in this room have been coming for a number of months or years, sense that, and their sensing and your sensing can change into living and in which, listen to this please, you'll never, never again be afraid of anything, including this mysterious world. It's mysterious to you now. You'll never be afraid of your own emotions, those flashes of hatred which you conceal because they're unacceptable to your images of being loving and good. And you won't be afraid of that monstrously sick and evil world out there. You will be free of it, entirely free, which is God's intention for you. I saw something very interesting on television the other night. Maybe you saw it too. Almost remarkable. You know what it was? It was a news item which showed how a new scientific technique connected with computers, where you can take old black and white movies and turn them into color. How many saw that? Wasn't it interesting? Showed some old comedies, Laurel and Hardy, I think. Showed them first in black and white, dull, just black and white. And then showed them how some astonishing technique. They just turn on the computer or something and mix it up with colors, I guess. And pretty soon there it is in colors. There are red neckties and yellow coats and so on. Absolutely fascinating. So they can take all old black and white movies and turn them all into color. Now, what's the point of that? The point of that is, up until a few months ago or a year ago, whenever they first created that, the possibility of it existed, but no one knew about it, right? In other words, don't we learn? We didn't have TV a while back. We didn't have airplanes a while back. So on the social level and in the scientific world, we're always exploring, probing, and therefore discovering. Human beings do not do that inwardly, spiritually, psychologically. There is, with the average person, the very idea of learning something new is frightful. Because look, to get the automobile, you have to give up the horse and buggy, right? And who wants to give up their old traditional favorite ways? Here's the point. You can learn 1,000 times more than you now believe you can. Now, I'm talking about the only kind of learning that's worthwhile for eternity. You can learn about your business, and that's just fine for this world. But you can learn 1,000 times more about how to understand yourself, how to be free of hostility, of anxiety, how not to be a fawner before other people, pleasing them because you're afraid of losing them. I order you never again to fear anyone. Oh, what an order that is, right? You've got a lot of work. How many have got a lot of work to do? All right. I tell you right now that by the spiritual learning process, you can learn how not to be afraid. You can learn to get rid of that conflict in which you try to go into 10 different directions at once. Look at the number of decisions you have to make during just one day, right? Thousands of them. Buying something in the store, talking with someone, and you block a little bit, and you stutter a little bit because you really don't know what to say. You know what that's called? That's called horrible self-torment, unseen self-torment. We'll reveal to you how you've been a slave of yourself. You don't know it. Seated here right now, you don't know because you refuse to see that you're a slave to yourself because you would rather live in destructive daydreams about how much you know. If you are suffering from anything at all, anything, you are living in unconscious self-deceit. That's bad. That's not religious. That's not spiritual to live in unconscious self-deception, is it? Is it a good thing or a bad thing to lie to yourself? Come on. Come on. Good or bad? You know it's bad. All right. Here you have a chance to break out of that by the process of learning something that you didn't know before. What's the problem? What is the blockage? I've already, in the course of 10 minutes, named quite a few of the reasons we don't change. You're afraid, I'll summarize it, and then go on. You're afraid that what you hear in this room is going to take away your life. Yeah, That's exactly what we're going to do. Aren't you glad? No. You're afraid, aren't you? Don't take away the only thing I have, even if it is one sickness after another. Don't you take away my illness. We'll explain this anxiety to you. We'll show you how we'll walk right with you. Every step. God will walk right with you. Through every step of the no man's land between where you are and where you can be with spiritual maturity. It's the no man's land that you fear. You see, you want to jump from where you are to heaven without going through the destruction of your hell. When you do that, when you leap over going into yourself and facing these things inside of you, when you do that, you have an imaginary heaven and an imaginary God and an imaginary salvation, an imaginary happiness, and imaginary future. That's called deliberate self-punishment too. Okay, let's try it. Let's try a little experiment right now, because we don't want to miss anything. We want to lash out at the devil, the dark forces. What are you really like inside? Come on, I'm not talking about your smiles at the party of your relatives or down at work. What are you actually really like inside? What kind of a human being are you? Shall I tell you? Want me to summarize it in one word? See, you understand all this is very positive, what I'm saying. It's positive because it's the truth. Negativities lie to you. You are a lost human being. See, look, to be found means that you've really found what is true about your life. You've transcended your old, wretched, lying life, suppressed, in which hatred becomes one of your most priceless possessions. What kind of an insanity is it to hang on to suppressed hatred and say, you're not going to take away my hatred and misery from me? Boy, I'll tell you, you come here once, you come here twice, you come here 10 times, and you'll begin to understand what it means to be sane, spiritually sane. The world out there and all your friends and all your relatives know nothing of it, and they don't want anything. They don't want anything to do with it, because it's going to destroy their self-worship, their egotism. It would destroy their beloved suffering. If you suffer, you are sick, and you are a danger. Do you want to be a good human being? Do you want to be an authentic, a person with an authentic conscience, authentic goodness, where you couldn't possibly hurt a human being, just as now you can't possibly refrain from hurting them? Would you like to have a real conscience, be really good, to be really free, to be really happy? You've been hearing about it for the last 14 minutes, and now we'll go on. Let's again see more specifically what this great barrier is that prevents a man or a woman from breaking out of his little cave in the side of the mountain where he's in the darkness and he peers out at the world with an astonishing number of contradictions. You know, the spiritual hermit living in his cave and looking out the world, all kind of contradictions. Oh, I want that woman. The man lives, I want that woman, but maybe she'll hate me, so I better not speak to her. I will speak to her. The man looks out and he sees all that money. I think I'll go out and get money, but how will I do it? There's so many other sharks, human sharks, wanting money too. How am I going to do it? Someone else looks out and they imagine they see security in someone who's very active. Do you know of anyone whose life is spent in phony activity, pretense? I'm going to tell you about them in about a second. Want to get out of the cave? We'll show you how. All right. 3 friends. Here's a story, illustrative story. 3 friends. Let's say they're 2 men and a woman. Met together one time after some years. They went to school together or something. And they met together at a cafe and had lunch. And they were three excited people. One of the men was very excited about, he was going to take some special courses, night school and special books, and get a higher education so that it would help him get what he wanted in the world. So he was interested and excited and telling the others about his new plans for going to this specialty school. The woman, let's say, was interested in social affairs. She lived in a town where all kind of activities going around, right? Look at the paper. And she was telling the two men about, she even had a little list. Tomorrow I'm going to go down to the gardening club. The next day I'm going to take part in a political event of some kind. And her eyes glowed. And when she was telling the men about all the exciting things she was going to do next week, she had her life planned out, huh? Isn't that terrible to plan your life like that? Well, the other man, he had some other excitement, like he was going to go into money making, perhaps, become a millionaire. All three of them could hardly wait. You ever been in a situation like this? All three of them could hardly wait for the other one to stop so they could talk about themselves. You know what that's called? That's called neurotic compulsion to blab. Oh, I'll add something else to it. That's called a neurotic compulsion to blab and bore. Some of you have a faint suspicion that you might be a blabbing bore. With how many of you is it more than a suspicion? Here they were, all trying to convince themselves and each other that they were going someplace, doing something exciting, that they were fulfilling themselves, that what they were talking about had meaning. Now, I have to preface the next part of this story with something. What I'm going to tell you, if it has happened once in the history of mankind, it would be considered a miracle. Because back 300 years ago, 800 years ago, in their own way, they were all talking about certain things, right? The same thing. Human beings haven't changed over 1,000 of years at all. They're still wandering over the face of the earth thinking they've found something when they've found nothing but themselves, which is a horrible destination. A miracle happened this once. Here they're all talking, excited. And you've experienced this, I'm sure. All of a sudden, where they're at a little table off in the corner of the cafe, and no one was bothering them. Plenty of room, so the waiters weren't anxious. And they were sitting there talking, and all of a sudden, something very strange happened. There was silence among the three of them. Now, I'll explain the psychology of it. Even neurosis gets tired of driving itself. It gets weary. Oh, I've been blabbing for the last half hour. My jaws need a rest. That was the one part of it. Another part was, and here's where the miracle comes in. You can experience this miracle if you understand what I'm talking about and want it more than you want your nonsense and your lies and your hostilities. Don't you dare go out of that room with hostility or criticism or hatred in your heart for what you've heard in this room. God help you if you do. Now, I'm talking to anything that is wrong in any of you, because I know what will happen to you if you do. You'll continue to go downhill, only at a faster pace, because you've given the truth and you've rejected it. On the other hand, if you've sensed something true, and I've been giving you nothing but truth, if you caught that much, and you go out and you say, wow, that's shocking, that's insulting, it goes against everything that I want to believe, but I'm coming back. I'm coming back for more. Because there's this little bit of you that senses the truth. Hang on to that. Don't you let anything or anyone, inside or out, take away that little seed of truth. They sat around the table there, and silence came over all three of them. And they all began, follow this please, they all began to get nervous and uncomfortable at the silence. You ever been with someone, all of a sudden goes silent, and you want to blab to break it? You don't, sure. All right. And so one of the men picked up a fork and pretended he was getting something, food or something. And the woman said, pass the salt. She didn't want the salt. But these three, I told you this is a miracle. These three people, while they got nervous, they didn't try to release or relieve it with more lies. And here's what finally happened. After they all look, you even look at each other hoping you see their mouth getting ready to say something. So, they all bore the emptiness. Huh? All right. All of a sudden, right at the height of the discomfort, one of the men said something that was truly from another world, literally from another world. He said, this is the one who is going to go to the special classes and become a millionaire with his new computer information or whatever. He said, I know I've been talking about myself the last half hour, but do you know, I have the slightest notion why I'm going to school. You know what the other two did? They heaved a huge sigh of relief. And then the woman said, me too. The other man said, oh, me too. Silence again, but different. Right? Are you following? There must be a God in heaven to have led us to this place of silence where we understood, we sensed that we were compulsive liars trying to convince ourselves that we were going somewhere interesting and profitable. There must be a God in heaven who suddenly caused this silence in us so that we saw the foolishness, the folly, the wreckage of our talking this way and acting this way, trying to kid each other and us. There must be a God in heaven. And I tell you, only with your receptivity to truth itself, God himself, can you have this experience. Now you fight it. Now you want to blab on. You want your mind. You love your riotous thoughts. You love chasing around because they keep you distracted from the fact of what you are supposed to really be doing with your life, which is to find yourself, which is to really contact God, reality. You want a new prayer, therefore? You just pray in any way you can. It can just be a word, a sentence. You just say, I want to hear something that is higher than me, that will give me a little bit of a jolt. It's small, sorry, because you can't take much. A little bit of a jolt that will also be a realization that all my life I have been talking and acting and going around in my sleep. I didn't know it before. I didn't see that the flash in my eyes and my excited voice and my gestures, I didn't realize that that was false. I tell my husband about something exciting. Why did I do that? Because I wanted to convince me that I'm elected vice president of the club. Husband, I was elected vice president. Isn't that exciting? How would you like to be able to sleep nights? How would you like to be able to go through the 24 hours of the day, conscious and awake, knowledgeable, uncomplicated, very simply, where you go through your daily tasks of working or shopping, taking care of the family or whatever, or you do that without destroying the world. Question. I asked you earlier, what are you really like? Now suppose you were filled with suppressed rage, secret rage, lies, calling yourself spiritual and all that. Suppose that you actually saw that that was the kind of a man or a woman you are. You had the honesty, the decency, and the spirituality to see it. The next thought that would occur to you, which would be a lesson upon a lesson, the next thought that occurred to you would be, what have I been doing to everyone I meet? I've been giving them me. I am fear, I've been giving them fear. I'm lies, I've been giving them lies. If you really want the blessing of God Almighty on your life, you will go through that shock, that pain, so that He can take it away from you. And then when you go simply through your day with your husband, wife, children, business, whatever it is, you're radiating something different. You're radiating giving out just by your manner. You don't have to say a word. You're radiating something that is higher than that old, horrible, insane nature that thought it was sane, but which was always destructive, which was always evil, and which never had a conscience. You in your present state, ladies and gentlemen, you do not know what it means to have a conscience. All you know is what you want to get. And you say that if I want it, that makes it right. Therefore, I'm justified in getting it in any greedy, immoral, wrong way I want. A conscience means that you are free from wanting anything wrong or self-destructive. But you lie and you say, I don't do things wrong and self-destructive. I do things right. That is the hardened lie that the Son of Truth has to start to melt down inside of you, so that you know what you're doing against yourself. I'll give you one more illustration. A group of pioneers from the east going to the west 100 years ago. I'll follow this. I want you to do this. I want you to be the pioneer that I'm going to talk about. 500 pioneers in the wagon train, right? They start off from New England somewhere, and they get toward the west. They get to Kansas, let's say, going west. And it's still desolate in those years out in Kansas. Huh? And they go to a certain place where there's a small lake. Well, you know, water attracts. You have to have water for all kind of things. So some of the people of the many who come stop and camp permanently around that little lake. The leader says, don't stop here. Go on. There's a bigger lake later on. Not all listen. Some stop. They go a little further on, a bigger lake, bigger than the previous one in Kansas. Now they're out in Colorado, up in the Rockies somewhere maybe. Bigger lake. The leader says, don't stop here. There's a bigger place, a big body of water further on. They don't listen. They're afraid to lose the security they have of the little muddy pool there. They don't go on and on. Finally, at the end of the trip, the 100 started. At the end of the trip, there's the leader, and there's one man and one woman left. All the rest have stopped within the circle of their own thinking, of their own mind, not wanting to go beyond it, staying neurotically, sickly, and hatefully inside their little circle. They stayed behind the little pool. Finally, the leader looks at the two, and he says, well done. Your reward is, and he gestures the Pacific Ocean. Right. Come here, we'll show you how to keep going in spite of yourself. You know very well, you know it in your heart. Don't lie about it, you know it. Your worst enemy is you. Look at your mind. Look at your raging feelings and your emotions. Don't you let anyone out there in that world steal the little bit of insight that you have all had, all of you, whether you've been new or old comers here. Don't let anyone take that away, because those devils out there will try. They want to keep you in hell, because hell loves company. I know how weak you are. I know how afraid you are of someone frowning at you, of someone criticizing you. I've got the most marvelous news of all to all of you here this morning. And look, it's so simple. Please, don't take it. Simplicity is not important. It's important because it is simple. It gets right to the point, and here it is. God, who really exists, you don't know that yet. You don't know that God exists. You worship yourself, calling it God. God, who really exists, is 1,000,000,000,000,000,000 times stronger than any sick, neurotic, devilish human being who would try to keep you from coming back here. God is stronger than any of the wrong parts in you that tell you not to come back. Do one simple thing. You can do it as best you can. That's a good phrase. That's all right. As best you can. You just ask God in the simplest way you can. God, please show me what is right. Because you don't know. You don't know. You've never known what is right and wrong. God, show me what is right. And you know what will happen to you if you do that with an honest heart and sincerity. I'll tell you what will happen. You'll be sitting at home, you new people, you old people. You'll be sitting at home and you'll be in conflict. You'll feel worried about coming back here. Should I or shouldn't I? God is the only person who can keep you coming back here, and that's all you need. That's all you want. Don't you dare listen to anything inside yourself or outside yourself that tries to take you away from the purity of this room. Because the truth is here, not because I am here or anyone else, but because the pure truth is here, you will be saved, and you will be saved forever. There was once a man, a lot like people you know and the people you are, whose life was characterized, overwhelmed, dominated by chaos and complaint. Describe your life so far: chaos and complaint. And like everyone else on earth, he didn't know what to do about it. So he did what everyone else does. He covered it up with thinking, and the more he thought about it, the more it drove him mad, because he found no solution in his thinking. Found no solution in his complaints about life either. How can there be a solution in complaint when it is a wrong, negative, useless feeling, expression, right? So he did what lots of people do, futilely, by the way. He went around asking other people for assistance in identifying his fundamental problem. He went to counselors, he went to religious groups, he read books, he followed advice columns in the newspaper. He did everything possible to try to see what the basic problem was, because he figured if he could do that, he could then work with it. And that's not too bad in itself. But being weak-minded, not knowing anything at all, he fell for a while for all the wrong solutions. He believed what they told him about keeping yourself active and meeting new people, getting new experiences, all the nonsensical advice that you get when you ask the world what to do. So he came to the point he didn't know what to do anymore. And yet, now listen to this. This is the problem. You never come to an end of your search for a solution on your level of search. You understand that? You always resort to the answer that you want to hear, because that is on your level and that's all you have. You don't understand that you're seeking an answer on your own level so that you can get a thrill out of it, be satisfied with it. This was his state. So he kept seeking, but of course there was no cessation to his pain because he hadn't found the true answer. So one day he was wandering around still looking for answers, and came lunchtime and he saw a Chinese cafe down the street. So he said, I like Chinese food, so I'm going to have lunch there. So he went in, had a nice lunch. Pretty soon the fortune cookie came, and he opened the fortune cookie and it said, sir, your problem is DPF. Wow, someone gave me the answer to what my problem was, but what is it? Your problem is DPF. So he asked the waitress, hey, miss, what's this DPF? I don't know. She didn't know what DPF was. He asked the cook. He didn't know. Nobody knew what DPF was. Have you ever been in that position where you've got a little clue, you think you have a clue, and it drives you crazy because you don't know what the clue means? I suppose detectives run across that all the time. You know, they get a little something, but what does it mean? What does a little broken piece of mirror mean? Whatever. So he searched around again, went to experts. Sir, madam, counselor, what does DPF mean? All they knew was it was 3 letters of the alphabet, right? No answer. Pain increased, chaos, more complaint. He got to be a crabby little man. And guess what happened? Being a crabby little man, he met a crabby little woman. Do any of you in this room who are couples have a reaction to that? But all they did was crab at each other, and so they split apart. But he still wanted a girlfriend. So he saw a listing in the paper for a Lonely Hearts Club. So he sent in his picture to the Lonely Hearts Club, right? And they sent back the picture with a little note that said, we're not that lonely. Oh, so the pain went on and on. Finally, he did meet another girl. And they went out together, and they went out to, for example, they went out to a picnic one time, and he crabbed and complained because she forgot the mustard. Right? He asked her to cook a 3-minute egg, and she cooked it 3 minutes, 1 second, and he crabbed and complained again. One time, she struck back. Right? You know, after the 3-minute egg incident, she looked at him and said, you and your DPF. He said, what did you say? You and your DPF. Your darling, precious feelings. Now you know. That was his problem. That's your problem. That's the world problem. So here's what he did. He finally saw a notice about classes at New Life Foundation in Boulder City, Nevada. And he came in and he began to hear facts about his DPF, his darling, precious feelings. And as he understood the problem, it began to fade little by little, but very definitely it faded out as an attacking force in his life. And here's what he heard. He heard, among 1,000 other things, that darling, precious feelings are an idolization. This is what you actually idolize. You don't idolize truth or someone else. You idolize your feelings because that is what you are. You are the feelings. You're not separate from them at all. And that's what he cherished, what he treasured, him and his darling, precious feelings. And no wonder, of course, he was offended all the time. Do you know really that the degree of spiritual and mental sickness can be determined by how easily you're offended? How quickly your darling, precious feelings are aroused. All right, he understood, as we want to understand far more deeply here in this room, that we live from them, therefore they dictate to us. Now come on, isolate this little idea about cherished little neurotic reactions and feelings. Isolate it and look at it very carefully under the mental microscope. And if you really see it, if you look down in there and see it, you will be astonished and dismayed to see how DPF tells you what to say, right? Where to go, who to be in contact with, how to feel, of course. It is a dictator of everything you do, and you didn't see it and didn't notice it until now. Now, isn't that revelation? Isn't that simple revelation a new and true spiritual experience for you? Remember the man? He was in chaos and complaint. He didn't know how, why, or what was making him unhappy. He was unhappy because he loved unhappy things. He loved his own state. Now look, if you are unhappy, I have told you why. You are worshiping the wrong God. You don't know it. Put it under the microscope. Why do you think that you have to cherish, be loyal to habitual feelings of being offended? Why do you unconsciously worship fear? It's the same thing as worshiping yourself, because that is your present nature. There's no nature that you have that is other than fear. Therefore, that's what you idolize. That's what you want to hang on to, because of course you say, if I don't have that, who will I be? What else will I have? Where will I go, and what will I do? If I dropped my darling precious feelings, to whom would I look for guidance? Someone says something to me, I hear some news, and if I can't react for my darling precious feelings, then what will I do? No. You're not going to leave me without an intelligent course of action. Put intelligent in quote marks, right? You're not going to take away from me my only source of what to do next. I told you one time, as long as you have a next, you're lost. You must have no next. Next is time. Next is thinking. Next is scheming. Next is planning. And what's it scheming to do? To keep you as you are, by the false self telling you, I am all there is, bow down and worship me. The world does, human beings do, see where you do, and you'll see exactly why you protect your feelings, why they are so precious to you, why you want to be offended. Did you ever think of that? Don't you know that one of your you don't know it, I'll tell you, you don't know. One of your strongest cravings is to be offended. One of your greatest greeds is to have troubles. You yearn for emotional conflict. It's all you have. You've bowed down and worshiped the golden calf of your own neurotic reactions. Here, right here in this room, you will see the mistake you're making. What else do you think we're here for? But to see the mistake which we have called rightness, called tradition, called necessary habit, called the only thing that exists. Now, I have told you that you have made a mistake in protecting your darling, precious feelings because you won't explore by remaining blank, by leaving a vacant space when a challenge comes up to you. All right, now you've got to do it. You've got to do what you've never done before. What you have to do is when someone gives you that scowl, when the world in some way or another does what you call offensive, you are to catch the devil behind the 12th tree before he rushes in to tell you, dictate to you what you should do and feel. Now, with your deliberate, voluntary refusal to accept the customary, habitual, wrong reaction, what happens next? That's it! Nothing happens. Nothing happens to you because for that split second, you're in eternity. You're not in time. Doesn't time belong to the past when you were a little boy or little girl and you started picking up this collection of junky reactions? Isn't that time? So by abolishing time, by refusing the reaction, by conscious knowledge of the damage of it, by refusing the customary reaction of feeling offended, of feeling hurt, nothing happens. Now, when nothing happens, that means, thank God for this, when nothing happens, that means both the most scary and most beautiful thing you'll ever know. When nothing happens, that means the absence of the reactor. Right? The absence of you. To the world, to sick society, this is the worst thing that can happen, to have an absence of the imaginary nature. To us here in this class, it is, there's no words to describe how great it is to see that you don't have to be there anymore as the person who was the receiver of his own destruction. That you can be out of the way. That there is something else besides you. There is something that you now, because you don't understand it fully, you call it a dreadful darkness, a vacancy, because if you were not there, you don't know who else is supposed to be there, which is why you'll fight for years to have this absence of you. But when you fully, consistently, all the time, working on it, refuse to fill the space with feeling offended, with being hurt, with anger, when you refuse to fill the space long enough, something will dawn on you that has never dawned before. And you'll, for months and years, there'll be a little, I wonder what's happening going on in your mind, referring to what is happening internally inside of you. And what is happening is your beginning glimpse, insight into the fact that there is something besides you. You don't have any clue of that. Now, I tell you, even though you hear me explaining it, you don't have that. Because you're going to go out of there getting your feelings hurt again, aren't you? At the smallest thing. You're going to get terrified, scared of, Or if you're a little bolder, you say, maybe if I could just get rid of 2 problems, that anxiety over loss of some kind, if I could just get rid of 3%. It's 100% or nothing. Right? You know why. When the sun comes up, it banishes all problems of shadows and darkness, doesn't it? How ridiculous to hope that the sun will banish one dark little corner of the world you can't see and understand. It doesn't work that way. It's ridiculous to even think that way. When the sun comes up, everything. Now, the way to understand this, I'll tell you how to understand what I just said. No longer be you. Challenge, huh? You like being you? You like being you and you hate being you at the same time, correct? All right, as always, marvelous news about our work to find, to understand what we've been discussing this morning. And here it is. We are, as we are now, captured people, correct? We're prisoners of war of this world. And don't the guards beat us all the time? Don't the attack dog come along? Don't you see all those fences around there with a barbed wire that slants inward so you can't get over it? And the patrols and all. Okay, we're prisoners of war. Now here's a good illustration, perfect illustration of why even right in the middle of your captivity in that huge prisoner of war camp called Earth, why you need have no fears, no doubts at all, because you can work where you are in the middle of the camp in order to discover how to get out. Not the world out there. They are not hearing the secret message, but you are. And here it is. You know how, say during wartime, there's big prisoner of war camp in Germany or Japan somewhere, and there's a radio broadcast from a free country, the opposing country, and they send there's radio broadcast in all over the enemy country, and the prisoners of war, they don't show the guards the radio they're receiving it on, do they? But they have the little secret corner where they can have the receiving radio, and they get instructions all day and night long on how to get out. The escape routes, the weather conditions, how to avoid patrols, things like that. I can't understand why you don't inwardly smile all day long, regardless of how deep you are in enemy territory, of all the obstacles and the fierceness of the guards and all that. You are getting, not you can get, you are getting, you're doing it right now. God is sending down his secret radio messages to tell you how to get out. Aren't you glad? And every time you hear one, you see, you know that God, truth, reality, is not of the nature of the fierce enemy that has you captured. Therefore, with right confidence, true confidence, you listen to the radio messages every night as they beam out. You back in your little corner there, several prisoners of war huddled around the radio, keeping it very low all the time so the guards won't hear. You have confidence in that because you know the difference between the nature of the country that you're in, the hostile enemy country. You can see the difference in that and the nature of the messages. Oh, I know that while we're in this room, and you know while you're in this room, you can sense that the messages of liberty are coming from a very high place up there, aren't they? You know that. I don't have to tell you that. You came here because you sensed it, and you're staying here because nothing. What is life to give you anymore once you get the first little message? Look, can you imagine a prisoner of war walking around the camp, working around there, and that becomes his life? He doesn't care whether he gets out or not. That's the world. They don't care. But you can't do that anymore, can you? And don't you go, I hope you do, don't you go around all day long trying to catch messages from a higher place that tells you how you can get out of this anxiety over someone hurting your feelings or whatever it may be? So here we are with a marvelous opportunity to listen more. And by the way, when you listen, don't be afraid of the periphery thoughts, surrounding thoughts that are coming from the prison camp that try to distract you and prevent you from hearing the pure instructions on how to escape. Now, see if you can connect what I'm going to say next with your actual experiences. You come to this class and you listen. That's parallel to listening to the secret message coming out of the radio there. And while you're listening to it, one of the guard dogs bark out there, and you jump. Let them bark all they want. They can't stop the message getting through, can they? Doesn't make any difference how many. They have 1,000 fences around. It makes no difference if you're 10,000 miles right in the heart of inside of enemy territory, and the nearest neutral border is 5,000 miles away. The enemy's strength is as nothing if you pay attention to what you're hearing instead of going back to liking to be scared. We talked about that earlier. See, you like to be scared. It gives you a feeling of life, false feeling of life. I want you to know that when you're listening to that message that you could give full attention to it and be extremely 100% obedient to it. The obedience in itself will become a new power for giving you more and more strength from not paying fearful attention to the shouts of the guards out there, to the barking dogs, to the occasional machine gun that they set off just to intimidate people. Example, here's what I'm talking about. How many of you go into daydreams and don't even know you're in them? You don't know that you're in them. You go into your mental movies all day. That's what I'm talking about. That's a distraction. As long as you get taken over by that little scene where you're getting revenge on someone, where you're making love to some woman, man, as long as you're in that, that's the barking dogs out there scaring you a little bit. And you'll hear something from the other side. You must fall out of love with the sounds and sights of the prisoner of war camp, and very resolutely determined to listen only to the secret broadcast. You'll fall a lot of times. You know that, don't you? You'll fail, won't you? You'll go into all sorts. That's okay. Sorry, we fail. Remember, we're allowed to fail 10,000 times, 1,000,000 times. Fail as much as you want, but correct it immediately by knowing that you got a false pleasure out of being terrified of the guard with a machine gun over there. Listen to the message purely, and within the message itself comes more and more strength to not be distracted, but to listen only to the escape message, which you will eventually go into action with. Even at the beginning, the message comes into your mind. It gives you plans to escape. The actual giving up your nature, the action of that would be parallel to the action of actually tunneling underneath the barbed wire of the guard camp and taking the journey itself until you reach freedom. That will happen. This urge to go into action on escape will come of itself at the right time. God knows more about your condition than you do. He knows when you're able to start the journey. And eventually you will hear the message coming from headquarters. Now is the time to start digging the tunnel, starting to act. Now that could be where you intend to come to more classes instead of haphazardly, to devote your life to what's... Yes, devoting your whole life to what goes on in here. That's what makes it a great life, because you know you're on the way out. You know it. Because you know you used to be inside the prison camp, but obeying the instructions, now you're 10 miles away and you're in the woods. Next you're crossing a field, next you're crossing a river. Pretty soon you see the neutral border over there, and pretty soon you cross over into the new land, the free land. A man or a woman cannot of himself manufacture, create, produce anything that is valuable in the sense of non-time. He cannot manufacture anything valuable for himself. This is difficult for a human being to see because of a number of reasons. One of them being that in everyday, ordinary life, you can take a piece of wood from over there, another piece of wood from over there, a third piece of wood over there, and take hammer and nails and put together all your pieces of wood and build a table or a chair. Or you can take the ingredients from a recipe in a cookbook. You can bring all those recipes, the portions together, and make a cake or a soup or something. And you say, I made the cake. I fixed the soup. So it becomes a mechanical mental habit for human beings to think in terms of themselves creating something. And this, of course, is carelessness from the very start, because when you're a young person, you make your first cake or you build your first table from lumber, you say, look, Mom, or look, dear, I made this marvelous table for you. And there's never any awareness of the fundamental fact that you did not create your own hands that picked up the lumber. You did not create your own thoughts, your own logic for putting the table together. And the sense of self, of I, creeps in, and then unfortunately expands itself to all of life, so that all you can say is, I did it, I accomplished this, to everything that happens, and it goes on so long and so hard that it becomes impossible for the average person to ever see the mistake he made 10, 20, 30 years ago and is continuing to do. This, of course, leads into great frustration, great anger, and great pain, because you pick up pieces in your life and you say, I'm going to accomplish this, I'm going to acquire that. And then when it doesn't happen, you get shocked and nervous and disturbed because it goes contrary to your thousands, tens of thousands of previous statements that I can do something of myself. Well, didn't I make a table? All right, I made the table. Therefore, I am a creator. How come I didn't get hired down at the factory where I applied? How come mighty I, who can create things of himself, wasn't accepted by that man or woman? And then the cry becomes a wail and goes on to say, see how unfair this world is. How did I ever get involved in a vicious, cruel world, society that I'm in? Ever done it? You have done it. Now, we have already tracked back the initial error, which is to believe that you can create anything at all. I must tell you, and you must hear me and apply it practically to your lives. I must tell you that if you think that you are a creator, you have only created a delusion. You've only created an idea which will always go bumping against the wall of reality in the world, and you will fall down and you will cry. Now that explains all the difficulties that you have experienced, all your frustrations, all your tears. Now, happily, it is not necessary for you to think that you are a creator, that you can create happiness for yourself or goodness for yourself. It is not necessary for you to think that. You don't have to think that you're a creator. You can set it aside altogether, and right now, you don't have to be a creator, because truth is. Now we can see the problem, can't we? Who are you going to choose? You or God? You or reality? You can tell what you've chosen by the number of times you banged up against that brick wall and fell down and cried. And don't you get indignant often at your treatment by the world, what you call your treatment by the world, which is nothing more than maltreatment by yourself? Aren't you all going to go out of this meeting then entirely new in your viewpoint and 100% victorious inwardly, because you know that you're in good hands? Oh, you know that you're in good hands if you know that you're in good hands. Now, would you call yourself being in your hands, being in good hands, or pretty dreary? Pretty horrible? Should we get stronger words? Okay. You must, therefore, do your own work in seeing that you think it is necessary for you to manufacture goodness, virtues, happiness, a pleasant nature. You still don't see that the very thought that you must do something is going to come into a circle and bang against the wall. And this is because you insist on being the creator of your own life, which is nothing but mad thoughts up here in your mind colliding with each other, threatening each other. Nervousness is one of the toys in the box that you pull out and play with and shake with, because you don't know that you don't have to do that. All right, let's go back to the Middle Ages. We're going to illustrate a point we're leading up to, a powerful point. Did you shift a little bit too, as I did? Did you notice yourself change a little bit? When I sit back, you tend to do the same thing. Back in the Middle Ages, when of kings and castles, a traveler was traveling down the highway, and he was within a couple hundred yards of one of these huge castles that you see in Europe, France and Scotland. And he looked and he saw a long line of men and women outside the castle, and there was the king himself at the start of the line, right outside the gate, the drawbridge. The drawbridge was down over the moat. And the king was seated in his throne outside the castle, and here were 200 or 300 people coming up one at a time. And the king spoke to them briefly, and after he did, some went away and others went inside the castle. And this traveler was curious as what was happening, so he stopped one of the farmers who was working out in his fields, and he asked him what was going on. And the farmer said, "It's indeed an interesting story. See all those 200 or 300 men and women out in front of the king there? They revolted, betrayed him a couple years ago, tried to overthrow his kingdom, the good king's kingdom, tried to overthrow it and take over. Well, 2 years later, they've come back to ask for forgiveness, to ask for another chance. They offended the king. I'm talking now about human beings offending truth by preferring to live apart from it and living with their own sickness. that so far? So the traveler watched it, but he thought he'd like to look a little closer. So he came up, walked on up, within fairly close to the king. And he heard and saw what was going on. One by one, the men and women who had been traitors, rebels, came on up. And the king heard them give him their story. One man would say, for example, well, I thought that it would be for the good of the whole country if I tried to take over your throne, and because maybe I had a little more wisdom than you did, something like that. The king would tell him, you may depart, and so the man departed and went back away and didn't enter the castle. Someone else would come up and make a little remark and say, I made a mistake. I was very foolish. I did the wrong thing. The king said, okay, I can see by your manner that you mean it. You may come in. This man, listening and watching, understood what was going on. Because he heard the king, this is very important, he heard the king say to one man who came up sort of arrogantly and proudly, he heard the king say to this one man, sir, I've heard your story for that last few minutes, and not once did I hear you say by word or manner that you were sorry for what you did. And I know that if you're not sorry, you haven't changed your nature, and you will do it again. Another man came up, same thing. The king would say, I've heard your story, I've heard your explanations, I've heard you tell me why you revolted against the kingdom. And sir or madam, and all your talking to me, explanations, I didn't see any sign of regret, of remorse. You have not changed the kind of a person you are. You are not really sorry, and you may depart. In other words, he could not go into the kingdom and be received back. Every once in a while, someone would come up, and the king would say, I can understand by your manner that you really are sorry, and you can come back. Do you see anything in that? If not, let's cover it a little bit. Let's see what it really means to be sorry. To be sorry for the way we've been, for the way we are. To be sorry means a recognition of our ignorance, of not knowing that falsehood is against us and truth is for us. Being sorry has to have a recognition in it. I did wrong. All right, say it another way. Being remorseful, really regretful, means you know that you, in your old nature, were wrong in what it did. So remorse is recognition. It means you see, it may not be a bright light, but a dim light is still a light. And you see by this dim light that the way you behaved was really against your true eternal interests. Do you understand something? That when you really know that something is wrong, it is absolutely impossible for you to do it. When you know, see, aware, conscious, spiritual, through spiritual intelligence, you know that something is wrong. It is impossible for you to carry it out as an action. How can light do something that's of darkness? Just now you find it difficult in your wrongness to do something right? When you see something so clearly, how can light go against itself? So that's what we're seeking. One gift, therefore, that you can begin to pray for, you can begin to accept and receive, is the gift of being sorry. And don't you think for 1 second that you can manufacture that. People are sorry because they get caught by the law, right? You know that. They're not sorry. Don't they do it again? If you do it again, you're not sorry. You're lying. Let me repeat one point that the king said. And I want you to apply this very closely to yourself, and it will explain why you do repeat your own inner mistakes that then project themselves outward to mistakes out in the world of people and events. Will you please examine yourself and try to see if your way of living, your day, indicates sorrow, true remorse for the way you are now. Now, if you have it, you will want to change it. If you're not sorry, if you're arrogant, you will want to change that arrogance. And that means you'll want to learn. Oh, you'll be so eager to read. That means you'll be so eager to use your experiences out in the world. And if you do something stupid, clumsy, you'll recognize it as that without condemning yourself. And you'll be sorry, and you'll say, oh, I really am sorry that I blundered into that sound asleep, walking around in inner darkness. I'm sorry that I did that way because I know that it is wrong. The world is not going to save itself because it calls its wrongness rightness. We talked about vibrations the other night. That's what the world lives for, is vibrations. Any kind. Anger, violence, any kind. Look inside yourself and see where you are not sorry. See where you're hard. See where you lie. See where you're kidding yourself about your intentions along the spiritual path. Maybe you just want to walk faster than someone else. Maybe you want to be a teacher along the path and tell others. Maybe you want to pretend that you know more than you do. I will tell you, every time you are authentically sorry, you will feel a little jolt. Because that means a revelation, simply a revelation of how foolish we have been.